Hey guys, I'm Josh Bowmar with Bowmar Archery, and today it's all about arrows. I'm going to give you 3 tips that make your arrows more accurate. Let's get started. Guys, I've actually already made almost a 2-hour video going into crazy detail on every single step that I take, 25 to be exact, to get the most out of every dozen. So I'm not going to do that in this video. I'm not going to go through every single detail. If you'd like to do that, you can click that link right here, I think is it, or it's over here. It's one of these places. I'll put that link there. You can watch that video after you finish watching this video, and I think that will definitely help you if you're a DIY guy with your own arrows. This video is going to be a little bit different. This video is designed for the guy that's going out, maybe picking up a dozen arrows from a shop, and they're bringing them home already fletched up, ready to go. Like, what can you do with those arrows to get them, or to get the most out of that dozen arrows? And I'm going to break it down into three separate tips, maybe a 4th bonus one at the end. We'll see if we have time for it. But tip number 1, I want to dive right into this, is sorting your arrows. So if you're at a shop and your shop's going to cut your arrows for you, ask them to do this for you. Say, hey, do you have a spinner? I need it. I'll do this part. Or ask them to do it. They may charge you extra, but it'll be worth it. So say you get a dozen arrows, and let's say they're just shafts and they're not fletched. That's going to be good, because what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to spin each one of the arrows. You have to remember, the number one thing that will ruin the flight of an arrow with a perfectly tuned bow is actually the spine of the arrow being incorrect. You know, these companies, they all make mistakes. Sometimes there is underspined or overspined arrows mixed in the group, and a lot of you guys don't have spine testers like the Ram arrow spine tester. It's like $250 for this. You can make your own and it works okay, but at the end of the day, you're just going to have to bank on your arrows being pretty darn close, because you'll know if it's bad. If you have one random arrow that flies way off, then that's probably a bad arrow. Just chuck that one. That one's probably not spined correctly. So aside from the lack of spine, the next thing that causes arrows to be inaccurate is actually not straight arrows. So a straight arrow is a great flying arrow. Just remember that. A straight arrow is a great arrow. So that can be something that you write somewhere. Straight arrow is a great arrow. So you want to get the most out of your arrow, and by making it as straight as possible. So how you do that is you just get a spinner. The Pine Ridge spinner is probably the cheapest spinner on the market. I would buy it just for these right here. That's what I did. Everything else about this thing's junk, but these things are actually pretty nice. So what I did is I took these old damaged arrows, and I put them in between a couple of weights and lengthened it out a little bit, and there you go. So if you have some busted up arrows, and if any of you guys are already my Bowmar Archery nose button customers, you probably have a couple busted arrows. Shameless plug. Oh, look, I put one right here to look at during the whole video. Sorry guys, that was, oh, there you go. Nice pan at the nose buttons. Okay, I'm sorry. That was just too much. My bad. But if you do want to buy one, the link is in the description below. Okay, back to the video. Sorry, I have to throw in my own commercials sometimes. But anyway, guys, if you're going to make your own arrow spinner, awesome. Most of the shops are going to have an arrow spinner, and you could do it right there. I know, unless they're jerks, they'll probably let you spin your own arrows. Or they'll do it for you. So anyway, how you sort your arrows, what I always do, if you aren't crazy about where the label is, I'll just spin the arrow, look and see which end's the most wobbly, and then I'll mark the wobbly end. So if I spin this arrow, I say, okay, that's okay. And I spin this side, and that's like super straight, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, you always want the back of the arrow to be the straightest. If you have to pick, you always want the back. So this one's a little bit on the wobbly side. So I have 2 options. Option 1, I cut from the back of the arrow. So obviously I'm not gonna be shooting a full length arrow. Say you got a 28-inch draw, your rest you shoot a 27-inch arrow or something. I would chop off from the back. That's going to get rid of that wobble. It'll be perfect. So problem is, maybe the next one, the wobble, it's straight on the back, and then the wobble's on the front. Well, now you got to cut from the front. So now you're going to have all these arrows that are all mixed-matched. So what I found to be the best, and companies hate me saying this, but I kind of wipe off my labels sometimes, because then it's just a pure arrow, and I don't care which end's which, and it can suck for the brands. I know I wouldn't want that done to my arrows, but If that's what you want to do, you can do it. Now, what you can do is chop off from the back, chop half off from the front, half off on the back. There's lots of options there for you to be able to cut your arrows, but you want to get them as straight as possible. So I'm going to teach you guys how to sort them. I know there was a lot going on in there, but again, the tip here is to sort your arrows. So if I have this arrow here, for example, I spin it. That back is really good. Let's look at that. This back doesn't need cut. I mean, just look at that sucker spin. That is awesome. So then I flip her around and I spin the front. See, the front is also really good. Front isn't as good as the back, so I would just do this. Boop. I'd mark that. Now, I would go through, I'm not going to make this video super long, just so I don't want to bore you guys to death, but I'd go through every one of my arrows and do that. Spin the back, spin the front, mark the end that's bad, chop off the bad end, leaves you with a good straight arrow. So, if you already have your arrows fletched, ready to go, you're like, great, I can't do that. Well, here's a tip that you can do. Let's say you have arrows that are already fletched up. You're going to spin them, and then you're going to label them. So say you got a whole bunch of fletched arrows, right? And I'll just grab fletched arrows. You stay right there, and I'll just grab some of these guys right here. A couple different brands. Okay, I'm going to grab this and spin it. So you can see the back is really good. The front is really good. Now, I'm going to be honest. I already did all these tips that I'm going to teach you guys right now to these arrows. Odds are they're already done. So most of them are going to be perfect. But what I would do is I would label this arrow. If you get an arrow like this, I would label it A plus on the front and plus on the back. So I rank it double. So if you want to come in real tight on this, so A plus on the front, which means the front of the arrow is perfect. A plus on the back means the back of the arrow is perfect. Now, if it was just 1 plus on the front, 1 plus on the back, it's really close to being perfect. And if it's an A minus on the front, then that means the front is wobbly, but an A plus is on the back is perfect. So you just rank them based on this. And this, you're like, why would I do this? Well, let's say I'm about to make a 90-yard shot on an animal. I want my very best arrow in the quiver. Let's say I'm hunting in a spot where it's real tight, where my furthest shot's going to be 20 yards. Well, I could use an arrow that's not necessarily perfect because it's only 20 yards. So each situation will call for a different arrow. And I mean, yeah, it would be great if you had a full quiver full of the best of the best. And that's typically what I do, is I will just leave out the A minuses and just only have a quiver full of great arrows, especially if I'm hunting deer. But let's say I'm hunting something like hogs or something that doesn't have as significant value for me, like in terms of chasing them, like time, effort, and energy. Like a deer I spend all year long focusing on. Maybe a hog, I'm just shooting a hog for a nuisance permit or nuisance reasons. Then maybe I'll use my A minus arrows. So this is important to do. But again, sorting your arrows, I'm spending a lot of time on this because it is actually important. So you spin all of your arrows, and then you'll rank them. And then once you get them all ranked, then you'll have those in quivers. Now, what you can do is you can have fun with this. So like you can write Old Glory or Beast Mode or Killer or whatever you want to put on there, and it's so much fun. You can do like killer arrows, you can write on your veins, you do all this fun stuff, and you label them. You'll see a lot of guys actually do this, and this is important to do. If you don't do this, you're missing out. Okay, so tip number 1, sort your arrows. Tip number 2 is going to be to square your arrow ends, and please don't turn off this video right now because you're like, oh my gosh, that's the most basic thing in the whole world. It is missed a lot, especially in shops that get real busy. They make these kind of mistakes. Not all of them, the good ones won't make these kind of mistakes, but some of them get really busy and they're just burning and turning in terms of arrows. So squaring the ends are so important because if you get a knock that doesn't fit flush to the back of this arrow will fly like junk, even if it's perfectly straight. And it spins like a dime, but that back isn't square. That arrow, it will not fly straight. That thing will fly off to the left, to the right, high, low, and you're like, what is going on with this? And you throw the arrow out, and little did you know all you had to do was square it. So my favorite arrow squaring device is actually from Fire Knock. And the reason is because you can square already fletched arrows, which is actually pretty cool. I don't know of any other one on the market that allows you to do this because it has these adjustable pieces here. If I can get it to move here. So you can adjust it like this. So then you can square ends. So you can actually, if you get in real tight, you can kind of see that this needs squared. You can see how it's not really flush. It's probably hard to see on the camera. But again, squaring your ends is as simple as this. You just take a piece of sandpaper up against something that is perfectly 90 degrees, and you're going to grind the heck out of that. Now, I'm pretty generous with this because I want to make sure that that's really square. So, squaring your ends. You want to do both ends. And so, especially if you're using outsert systems or something like this, like the further out, like say you're using like a half out like this titanium Easton outsert, or maybe you're using the outsert systems that come with the Black Eagles, or half outs of any kind other than straight up inserts, then these things stick further out. So let's say that this is off just a little bit. Well, this is going to be magnified because it's sticking out in front of the arrow so far. The longer the insert, the more a tiny error in a wobble is going to make this. Because then you got to think, you got a broadhead sticking way out here too. So then you got a broadhead that's sticking way out here. Well, now a little tiny wobble in this, or a little error in squaring the end, now this tip's going to look like this. And that is a massive error, especially with fixed blades, because if the tip of the arrow is doing this, you got to think it's flying through the air, capturing wind, right? And wherever it's capturing wind, it's creating drag. And so when you have the front of the arrow creating more drag than the back of the arrow, you will have an inaccurate arrow. That's just plain and simple. So when you run fixed blades and you don't have enough drag on the back, not big enough profile vanes or whatever, this arrow is not going to fly great at all. You'll have no accuracy. Well, let's say you have an arrow on there that's perfectly straight and it spins perfectly through the air. Well, now there's less drag, which gives more drag for the vanes to catch, which means it's going to be accurate. The most accurate arrow in the world is a flu-flu, but good luck, because a flu-flu will guide it great. You don't have to tune your arrows at all with a flu-flu, but it loses so much energy it's not as efficient. Doesn't mean it's any less accurate. So again, more drag on the back equals more accuracy on the front. Now, I'm not telling you this isn't the part where I say, oh, shoot a 4-fletch and then you're going to be fine, because you got clearance issues, speed issues, and FOC issues where you add too much weight to the back. It can create other issues. The point is to square the front end of your arrows and square in the front and square in the back, so you get the most the perfect spot, most perfect edge for your insert to bump up against. And then the next tip, which will be tip number 3, is spinning your inserts, which means you are going to need to use hot melt. And this is not very popular in pro shops. Just something to keep in mind, because hot melt is a recipe for a mess. It's not as fast. It takes more effort and work. So a lot of shops are not going to use hot melt unless you ask them. So a lot of this stuff, maybe shops are going to hate this video because of this reason, but these are things you can do at home too. Like say, hey, I want to put in my own insert shop. Thank you for everything else. I'll put in my own. And you can go and just order some hot melt. This is going to be at every single Bass Pro there is. Every Sportsman's, all of those places are going to have these. It's just regular hot melt, super cheap. All you need is a blowtorch. Get these suckers on Amazon. Look up like food torches. I think this is how they make creme brulee or something like that. Anyway, blowtorch hot melt. And here's why. So I'm going to insert this. If I used permanent glue, I'd go in here. And so I'm going to heat this up real quick. Put a little bit of a hot melt on this. And I'm going to show you guys a trick. This is by far the best tip in this whole video. So I'm going to hot melt this in. And you're like, well, it's going to fall out in the animal. No, it's not. Because the force is applying against the arrow. It's never going to fall out on the arrow. All right, so I stick this sucker in there. And what you're going to want to be able to do is when you spin this, you want to rotate this. You can see I'm rotating. I'm going to use pliers for visibility reasons. And you're going to want to grab this and spin it until you get a perfect arrow. Let me spin this around for you guys so you can see this. So you can see that that is perfect. Now, a lot of them won't be. So I'm going to show you guys, just heating this up to pull it out. I'm going to stick this in something else because that just happened to be perfect. So I'm hoping one of these won't be perfect. So, yeah, now we're talking. Let me get this sucker cinched down in there. Okay. There. Can you see that wobble? Let's look at this. All right, you see that? A lot of you guys, I'm going to keep showing you that. Okay. A lot of your guys' arrows are going to look like this, especially if you don't spend the extra money to get the 0.001 thousandths straightness. The cheaper arrows are going to be 0.003. Like, look at your arrows, and if it says, like, right here, if you look at your arrows and it says 0.003 instead of 0.001, this step is going to be huge for you guys. So this right here is a lot where that price tag comes, and the type of carbon that it is. You know, the more expensive carbon is lighter and still is strong, so you get a lighter overall arrow and straightness. So lightness and straightness has a lot to do with arrow quality in different builds. I mean, different composites, all that stuff. But anyway, a lot of you guys are probably buying affordable arrows, which aren't going to be the $170 a dozen type of arrows. So this step that I'm going to teach you right now is going to be very important, and that is spinning your arrows and inserts until they line up perfectly and make a perfect bullet hole or perfect no wobble type of spin. So let's do this. Let's check this out. Okay, so you guys can see that this sucker has got a wobble. So we're going to heat this up, and you can't do this with normal glue. So we're going to heat that up just a little bit so we can turn it. And then, oh, look at that. One turn. You can see it's already getting better. I'm going to try to keep this on here so you guys can see. So we're just keep spinning this sucker until it's perfect. Oh, there we're talking. So there you go. So you can see if you spin it. Now, I want to make sure it's perfect. It's not perfect, but it's really close. So we're just going to do little tiny turns until she's perfect. That's what you want right there. Look at that. And what I'll do is I'll move it just a little bit more just to make sure. I mean, that looks so good. And then I can move it back. That's what you want. And so guys, again, this is huge. So that little tiny bit is so massive. And so if you guys do this, and let's say you have like a big old broadhead on the front, I'll grab one, just hang out right there for 1 second. I literally have a bag of broadheads I've used. So let's just use, let's say this broadhead, for example, or here's a popular one. So let's say you have this broadhead and it spins true like this now. So you can see that. And you're like, well, it's a field point. What matters? Well, yeah, field points you get away with more, but see, look, you got all these blades now. So if this had any little wobble in it, well, now it's not just the tip. Now these blades are wobbling in and out. And so this is really straight. But if it wasn't, what happens is this will be flying through the air like this, right? And you have that wobble. Well, now all these blades are catching wind and drag, creating an unstable environment for this arrow to fly in. And then in order to make it stable, you're going to have larger vanes on the back. And that sucks sometimes because the larger vanes you put on the back, the more weight you're going to have on the back, which then is going to lower your FOC, and then the slower your arrow is going to fly. And a lot of guys are running lighted nocks, so you got 15 grains here, and then you run a 4-fletch here. You start weighing at the back there, you're not going to have a lot of great FOC. And you're going to want at least 12%. And I know that's pretty low. 12 to 15 is pretty standard for considering being pretty good. But Sarah, for example, is running like 22%. I'm running, I think, like 18 or 19% FOC. And again, a lot of guys don't check it, but they're still all putting weight on the front. The reason is because weight on the front makes the arrow more accurate. If you ever screw in a 100 grain point, then you're putting weight on the front of the arrow to make it more accurate, and you're adding FOC to the arrow. So how much FOC is debatable, but we do know that less isn't necessarily better. So the point is I got a little sidetracked there, but if you create a perfectly straight flying arrow like this that doesn't have any wobble in it at all, and let's say you have a perfectly tuned bow, so then this arrow is not doing this, coming out of the bow trying to correct itself, that will make a much more accurate arrow because that sucker will be spinning through, catching less air because it's not doing this, it's doing this. And because it's catching less air, it'll have less drag on the front, allowing the vanes on the back to have more drag. When it has more drag, it will help steer the front, and then boom, you're going to be golden. So I think that tip is extremely important because a lot of guys will go into the woods and their broadheads aren't going to fly great, and then you say, oh, well, Josh, I use a mechanical, so this doesn't apply to me. Yes, it does. I'm going to grab a mechanical, and I will show you why this matters. Okay, so right here's a sever. And you're like, and you look at these two, and you're saying, well, obviously this one's going to fly more accurately, right? Because it has less surface area. But when we actually put these side by side, look how close the wings are to the width of that broadhead. So guys, even with mechanicals, you need to pay attention to this stuff because it will make a difference. Because if this started wobbling, these wings, yes, there's less surface area here. Yes, it will collect less wing drag, but you still have some wings sticking out here that will create drag, which will cause an inaccuracy on the back. So a less wobble on the front is going to be the most important thing. Well, not the most important, but it's very, very important for accuracy because then all of this too is losing energy. So if you're shooting a bow, let's say 40, 50, 60, 70 pounds, any of those poundages, you're always going to want more energy when you hit the animal. If it's flying through the air like this, I mean, that's not very energy efficient. And so what'll happen is you're going to hit the animal with less energy. So if this arrow flies perfect, it's storing all of that energy perfectly, and then it will crush that animal. And so that's why a tuned bow will outpenetrate a non-tuned bow, even though it's the same poundage, same speed, but then why does it outpenetrate if it's the same poundage, same arrow, same everything? The reason is because the stored energy then transfers to the point of impact. But if it's wobbling like this, it's losing a lot of energy in flight. And so you're going to get less penetration. So I know all this seems so extra and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm shooting a deer. I'm telling you guys, this stuff matters because when you got that buck of a lifetime sitting in front of you, you don't want a wobbly arrow hitting him. You're going to want that sucker hitting perfectly straight and you smoke him because God forbid you hit that scapula, you're going to want the straightest arrow possible busting through that shoulder bone. So anyway, guys, there is 3 tips that you can use on your arrows that will make you a more accurate shooter. And a lot of you guys are already great shots, you just have crappy setups. So let's get the setups fixed. That's kind of my goals and mission here with Bowmar Archery and Bowmar Bowhunting is to help every archer become a better shot. And we're going to do that one video at a time. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button because right now is an epic time to do that because we are doing a 7-animal, 6-day African safari giveaway when we hit 200,000 subscribers. So we're going to give that hunt totally all inclusive, all free to one of you lucky subscribers. So make sure you turn on the bell notifications and hit that subscribe button. And that way you're always tuned into our channel. So as always, Sarah and I are very grateful for your support. So thanks, guys. Have a nice day.